Tonight, South Australians stand with Ukraine. Vigils in Adelaide for a nation under attack. Russian missiles bombard Kiev. Invading troops now just 30 kilometres from the capital. Also, a big night ahead for our city, with many restrictions lifted at midnight. Why health experts are worried. The PM drops in to bolster the Premier's election campaign, but so far no sign of Anthony Albanese. And a Crows recruit locks in a round one debut with a starring role in a disappointing loss.
Live from Adelaide, 7 News with Jane Doyle.
Good evening. Russian forces have pushed deeper into Ukraine, now just 30 kilometres from Kiev. The capital has been hit with a renewed missile attack in the last hour. Russia has launched air and ground attacks from the north, east and south. This is the damage from one of the blasts today, part of a rocket smashing a Kiev residential building. Tonight, there are fears the capital could be Russia's within days. We'll take you there shortly, but first, the Adelaide Ukrainian community is right now standing together in support of their homeland. Hannah Ford's at the Ukrainian Community Centre where a vigil's being held. Hannah, how many are coming together tonight?
Well, Jane, the vigil is just about to begin here, and as you can see, there are dozens of people packed into this hall, ready to pray for their loved ones still trapped in the conflict zone. Our Ukrainian community is 5,000 strong, and at least half of them are expected to have direct family links to the country now in turmoil. Devastated members coming together as they hope for protection for their loved ones. Members of the Ukrainian community today met with the Prime Minister in the hope of gaining support for visa approvals for those stuck in the violence. We've spoken to several expats today, one telling me there's no money in the ATMs, no petrol in Bowsers, and they've run out of food. They're too scared to go outside as the sound of explosions ring out across the city.
Very sad. I wake up, I'm always crying about this, I'm always thinking about this, always listen about news, and very scary.
A shocking vandal attack on a local MP's office is being investigated by police. Vile anti-Ukraine language spray painted across the windows. And Jane, tonight our local landmarks, including Adelaide Oval, will be lit up in blue and yellow as a sign of support. Back to you.
Thanks, Hannah. Tonight, missiles are raining on Ukraine from Russian strongholds. Going into the second day of war, more than 100 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed and more than 100,000 people have fled the country. It's feared the capital could be Russia's within days.
Through a window near Kiev, the view of war. Russia's arrival on the doorstep of a democracy's capital. 2 Ukrainian fighter jets raced to a local military base under attack. Russian helicopters are trying to disable Ukraine's defence network 40 kilometres outside the capital.
How can I find it?
And suddenly realised that, we had stumbled upon and we'd encountered that forward group of Russian special forces that had been put into that base just a few hours before by helicopter.
What we're hearing today, it's the sound of a new Iron Curtain descending, cutting Russia off from the civilized world.
But Ukraine is fighting back. Defence experts say this is a Russian fighter jet shot out of the sky near Kiev by a Ukrainian anti-aircraft missile. The local forces also claim to have destroyed these Russian tanks, a Russian helicopter, and captured these soldiers.
Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences.
The United States estimates more than 160 missiles were fired in the first 24 hours of this battle. Russia claims it destroyed 83 Ukrainian targets and disabled all of Ukraine's air defences in the first 3 hours. Like this radar station near the Black Sea, the human toll, at least 137 of Ukraine's soldiers have been killed. as fathers say goodbye to their children, possibly for the final time, with all able men called up to fight. Men of all ages, here an 80-year-old, 2 T-shirts, 1 pair of pants and a sandwich, ready to face the front line to protect his grandchildren.
I'm driven to conclude that Putin was always determined to attack his neighbour, no matter what we did. Now we see him for what he is, a blood-stained aggressor.
Most feared the attacks would focus on the pro-Russian enclaves in the east, but it went so much further. Confirmed explosions show precision attacks across the country, even the capital Kiev, Odessa on the coast, everywhere. Even capturing the notorious Chernobyl nuclear reactor, where analysts say radiation levels there spiked overnight. In Kiev, Soviet-built subways became shelters from Russian bombs. Above ground, a rations rush on cans and cash.
There is no purgatory for war criminals. They go straight to hell.
The US, UK and EU are imposing new sanctions on more than 100 Russian banks and companies.
Now we have to meet the moment. We will hold the Kremlin accountable. The package of massive and targeted sanctions will have maximum impact on the Russian economy and the political elite.
They'll be stopped from trading in US dollars, British pounds and Japanese yen. But critics say it's still too soft a sanction. Russia can still use SWIFT, the secure system that connects banks in more than 200 countries.
The purpose of the sanctions has always been and continues to be deterrence.
Given the full-scale invasion, given that you're not pursuing disconnecting Russia from what's called SWIFT, the international banking system, respectfully, sir, what more are you waiting for?
The sanctions we've imposed exceed SWIFT. The sanctions we imposed exceed anything that's ever been done. They are profound sanctions. Let's have a conversation in another month or so to see if they're working.
As buildings burn, civilians are among the casualties, and tonight are filling roads to Poland, the nearest escape route. This family had abandoned the car and were headed out by foot. A family of 6 people walking out of Ukraine to safety. Poland's border is literally 100 metres that way. But it was a border farce, a crush of cars and chaos, thousands of them. This desperate mother knows no one in Poland, but she knows it's safer than home. Where are you going to go to?
Poland.
Who to? Family?
No.
Where?
No.
You don't know where?
No.
Nowhere to go, but going anyway. And you packed up and you decided to leave. Where are you going?
I don't know.
Don't know?
I don't know.
So this is the humanitarian consequence of Vladimir Putin's actions. Thousands of people trying to flee, and this is just day one. Aid agencies are braced for an exodus that will run for months and could number in the millions. Similar scenes played out at Poland's 8 border checkpoints. It's expected Ukraine's other neighbour nations, like Hungary, Romania, will be experiencing the same. We've been driving for kilometres, and this queue of traffic trying to get out of the country goes on and on. I can't see an end to it. It's 3:30 in the morning. These people are desperate to get out. Ukrainians running into Europe's arms. Ironically, that's Putin's gravest fear, the reason he launched this unprecedented assault, to stop Ukraine drifting any closer to the West. After today, he may have pushed them closer than ever before.
This is a grave moment for the security of Europe. This is a deliberate, cold-blooded and long-planned invasion.
And Chris Reason remains in Ukraine tonight. Chris, you've got some new details on the Ukraine fight back.
Yeah, good evening to you, Jane. Ukraine has issued a hit list of battlefield successes in this first 24 hours of this war, claiming to have destroyed some 30 Russian tanks, 130 armoured vehicles, 7 aircraft, 6 helicopters. But the reality is that here on the ground, the Russian assault is moving at speed, with today Ukraine President Zelensky saying that he knows he's their primary target, his family number 2, and then the nation, with some predictions that the capital, Kiev, could fall within the next 72 hours. Jane?
Thanks, Chris. Well, as you can see, it's the morning there in Ukraine, and while tens of thousands of citizens are attempting to flee, millions more are waking to their second day in the middle of a war zone.
Panic descending across the main roads of Ukraine. Petrol stations inundated as the Russian invasion spreads. Cars waiting hours to fill up, these drivers left with empty tanks. The system controlling Bowsers and payment has broken down. Under an imposing threat, missile attacks coming in fast from a large Russian army. This is a relic of a previous war when the Russians were fighting the Nazis, and it happens to be near a Ukrainian radar system that the Russians fired a missile at early this morning. After we filmed, we were stopped by local villagers. They were suspicious. They thought we could be spies, and they called the police. Local police gathered around us on a street outside Lviv, demanding we show proof that we were Australian media and not Russian operatives. Locals are tense because they're now living in war. This missile landed in an apartment building. Incredibly, it didn't explode, but too many did. People are fleeing, with threats coming from the sky and on the ground. A fierce anxiety running through a population already fearing for their existence. Jeff Parry, 7 News.
Russia's heavy-handed approach has been met with swift reaction from global superpowers. We crossed live now to Ashley Mullaney in Washington, DC. And Ash, the United States is certainly leading the charge.
Jane, the US and Western allies are looking to make a pariah of Vladimir Putin with these sanctions designed to cripple the Russian economy. The US president has reiterated today that he will not be sending American troops into Ukraine, but he has deployed another 7,000 to Germany to help protect NATO territory. This as concerns grow for the safety of Ukraine's President Zelensky, with fears that he is Russia's number one target.
We do know, and part of the Russian plan has been to put Kyiv in danger, to assault the capital, to go after other major cities.
You're convinced Putin's going to overthrow this government?
I'm convinced he's going to try to do that.
As US President Joe Biden deals with this crisis, his predecessor Donald Trump has released a statement saying that this crisis wouldn't have happened if he was in office. As the situation deteriorates in Ukraine, protests have broken out in cities across Russia, demonstrators protesting against President Putin's decision to invade, many of them arrested, many of their futures too uncertain tonight. Jane?
Thanks, Ashley. In breaking news, Australia plans to expel Russia's deputy head of mission in Canberra and potentially other diplomats to send a message to Vladimir Putin. 7 News understands Ambassador Alexei Pavlovsky won't be thrown out, so the government can maintain a direct line to Moscow. This follows Scott Morrison's ramping up of sanctions against Russia in a global push to isolate the Kremlin.
The bombs are falling a long way away, but they still pierce the hearts of Ukrainian Australians like these. 40,000 here now, soon to be more.
The visa applications of all Ukrainian citizens have been put on the top of the pile.
Endorsing Scott Morrison's description of Vladimir Putin.
I call him a thug.
Today offering more support to Ukraine, non-lethal military equipment, medical supplies and money. Ratcheting up sanctions against President Putin, his military chiefs, billionaire oligarchs, all members of the Russian Duma, now extended to its war ally Belarus, and wanting all international sporting events in Russia cancelled.
I commend those Australians who are saying they won't participate in anything that is occurring in Russia this year.
Praising leading nations for speaking with one voice against Russia's invasion, except one.
I particularly have been concerned at the lack of a strong response from China.
Concern verging on anger as China eased import restrictions on Russian wheat overnight, allowing more in.
You don't go and throw a lifeline to Russia in the middle of a period when they're invading another country.
We support the actions that the federal government have done.
Defence Minister Peter Dutton going much further, demanding President Xi break his unholy alliance with Russia and not only condemn the invasion, but step in to stop it.
President Xi is probably the one world leader who can actually pick the phone up to President Putin to tell him that this is a catastrophic mistake and he should withdraw. That hasn't happened.
President Putin was a conspicuous visitor at the recent Beijing Winter Olympics, meeting President Xi before attacking Ukraine.
The Chinese government will be assessing, how much leverage they have over Putin at the moment.
China's foreign ministry accuses the US of having fanned the flames of war in Ukraine.
The person who started the fire should think about how to put out the fire.
Aiming that at President Biden. Mark Riley, 7 News. Let's turn now to some happier news at home, and in a few hours' time, stand-up drinking inside pubs and clubs and dancing at private functions will make their long-awaited returns. The easing of restrictions coincides with what's expected to be the busiest weekend of the social calendar, but we're being warned the timing could prove disastrous.
Bethany Glanville is getting married tomorrow and has received the ultimate wedding gift. She can now sing and dance at her own reception.
We were jumping for joy in the shopping centre. We're super excited.
After cancelling last October due to COVID 6 weeks ago, Bethany and her fiancé Shane decided to book a new date despite tough restrictions.
It's been awful. It's been entirely stressful. It's taken a lot of my mental energy.
Less than 2 days out, that all changed.
I couldn't believe it. I'm still in shock. At the moment, I can't believe that we can dance and sing and do all these things that we've wanted to do for so long at the wedding. So it's going to be the wedding of our dreams.
City traders too have reason to celebrate. From 1 minute past midnight, stand-up drinking is back indoors for businesses operating at 50% capacity. If patrons remain seated, they can go up to 75%. Bar and pub owners are preparing to be run off their feet.
Busy, absolutely busy, from open till close, depending on the weather, of course, but yeah, we'll be flat out. It is a nice little booster to get people through the doors after such a hard couple of months.
But there's still plenty of frustration.
It's just a little bit difficult for us to then know exactly how for our staff to manage. When to allow people out to have their masks off inside, when do they have to have them on? Obviously we need to choose with 75% seated or 50% with standing consumption.
The industry is now calling for a change to close contact and isolation rules. The Police Commissioner says that's still under review. Rosie Barnett, 7 News.
And Rosie's in the city where crowds are building, but Rosie, it's not a welcome sight for everyone.
Jane, the second weekend of the Fringe is traditionally its busiest, and already there are signs tonight is going to be a big one. For opening weekend, more than 100,000 people were out and about, and over the next couple of days, that's expected to double. But some health experts fear that increased foot traffic and eased restrictions could be a recipe for disaster.
Basically opening up when it's not safe to do so. You can understand why we've got the Mad March coming up, we've got elections coming up, but nonetheless from a public health viewpoint it could end up in disaster.
The Police Commissioner hasn't ruled out reimposing restrictions if cases soar. At the moment, they're remaining relatively steady. The state recorded 1,714 new infections in the past 24 hours and hospitalisations have dropped. But the real test will be when those restrictions are lifted from midnight. Jane?
Thanks, Rosie. After 4 days of searching in the state's mid-north, police have found no trace of murder victim Robert Atkins. The large-scale search continued today, scouring thick scrub near Orroroo. It's believed Mr Atkins was killed there in November 2020. Police say new leads have come in since the operation began on Tuesday. We're now just 3 weeks out from the state election and the Liberal Party's preparing for the final countdown. The Prime Minister flew in today to give our space agency a lift, but was careful to avoid the embarrassing blunder that eclipsed his last visit.
Onwards and upwards.
I love Lot 14.
Scott Morrison was careful not to repeat the gaffe that overshadowed his roads announcement here 2 weeks ago.
This city shaping, you've got to be careful with that.
Today, he was very careful with his words.
The return of the Marshall government here in South Australia is an absolute necessity. And with that, I'll bring you Mr Smiles.
3 days after Federal Treasurer Josh Frydenberg's visit, Mr Morrison promised to inject $65 million into the National Space Agency and set a mission to get an Australian astronaut into space. While Stephen Marshall was by his side, he didn't promise to pitch in any state money, saying his government's already invested tens of millions.
We've been lobbying for this additional federal government money.
Stephen Marshall seems keen to align himself with the feds, with 2 joint press conferences already, and it's only week 1 of the campaign. But so far there's been no sign of federal Labor leader Anthony Albanese. Peter Malinauskas expects him to stop by in the next couple of weeks. Meantime, he's charging ahead with his health agenda, revealing where more of the 300 hospital beds promised will go.
This is critical because ramping is now up 485% over the life of this government.
24 new beds have been allocated to both the Flinders Medical Centre and the Lyle McEwen, while Gawler Hospital's in line for 16. Andrea Nicholas, 7 News.
Footy fans have welcomed news they'll be able to pack out Adelaide Oval this season. Theo Doropoulos is there, and Theo, it's been a long time coming.
Certainly has, Jane, after 2 COVID-affected seasons. It's going to be quite a sight to see this magnificent oval at capacity again, or at least close enough to it in the early stages of the season. Both the Crows and Power expect to host around 40,000 people here. For the first time in 2 years, members will be able to sit alongside family and friends in their usual seats, and punters will once again be able to buy a ticket at the gate. The good old days. The expectation is some minor restrictions like mask wearing could remain in the very short term, but the big question will be, will fans flock here like they used to, or will they need a bit of encouragement? Power tickets will be hard to come by, of course, as the club prepares for another tilt at the flag.
The march down from the mall, never tear us apart, and with crowds back like they used to be, there'll be incredible energy in the stadium. We can't wait for our first home game against Hawthorn, round 2.
As for the Crows, well, the round 3 showdown will be a big test. Ordinarily, it's one of the hottest tickets in town, but some news that'll likely go down, like a warm beer on a pretty hot day. Prices here at the Adelaide Oval will go up this season. A refreshing ale will cost you $8.90, up from $8.50, while a pie will cost you 50 cents more. It is, of course, a little cheaper than the pre-COVID seasons when a full-strength froth would cost you near $10. Jane.
Small mercies indeed. Now it's time to check on sport with Soda. What's coming up?
Well, Theo was talking footy, so let's get right into it. Footy is back. The Crows and the Power were in action in anger for the first time today, although it was a practice matches for both situations. Adelaide found the going tough against one of the AFL's premiership contenders, but not all bad news. One of the youngsters was an absolute standout. We'll tell you about him. Port, well, Wayward in their first pre-season hit out. This was against the Suns. Biggest issue, though, is injury concerns, and we'll let you know about that shortly. And also, well, the Adelaide United's women, can they make finals for the first time? Well, they have a huge opportunity coming up against the Melbourne Victory. All that, Jane, plenty more coming up shortly.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Soda. A Campbelltown worksite had to be shut down this morning to rescue a tradie wounded by a nail gun. That's next. Also, a victim calls for tougher penalties for people who attack police officers. The hunt for a pair of bumbling bandits who broke into an electric bike shop, and the safety campaign targeting older drivers. That's about to hit our streets. A former South Australian police officer who was the victim of a violent assault during a routine arrest wants greater protections for police. Then Constable Paul Jelfs was trying to execute a warrant when Stephen Tipping attempted to grab his gun from his holster in 2018. As the pair wrestled on the ground, the officer was punched repeatedly.
We deal with violence all the time. If they're found guilty in a court of law, punishment should be swift and hard.
Tipping, who was twice found guilty of assault, wants to serve his sentence on home detention. 2 bumbling bandits are on the run after breaking into an electric bike shop at Mawson Lakes and snatching 2 scooters. The crime was caught on camera, and so was the clumsy getaway as one of the suspects took an embarrassing tumble.
They've done quite a good job at getting in here, but it looks like on the way out, they weren't as clean. Probably not the most skilled criminals going around.
It's alleged the not-so-smooth crims also took 2 charges from the DYU Australia showroom. Police are investigating. A young tradie is recovering tonight after a sickening accident at a northeastern suburbs construction site. He was working on the first floor of a two-storey house when a nail gun misfired.
A painfully delicate operation at Campbelltown. Emergency crews rushed to the Park Street building site just before 9:30 this morning, where a young tradie had suffered a sickening injury. 22-year-old Clayton Bridgeland accidentally fired a nail gun, not into a wooden beam, but straight into his thigh.
It was a bit hectic there.
Checked over by paramedics on the first floor, and with a little pain relief, crews began their careful rescue mission to bring him down.
What we feared was that it was going to have impacted his femoral artery.
A risky operation requiring special equipment.
It's an aerial appliance that's designed for tight places. We're able to access the casualty in underneath power lines.
The site ground to a halt and Clayton's workmates watched on while crews worked fast. It was an especially tense 15 minutes for manager Phillip before his employee was finally back in the hands of paramedics on the ground.
Can't thank them enough.
The young tradie was taken to the Royal Adelaide and is expected to be back on deck in no time.
I expect it to be a fairly quick recovery for him.
Taylor Jones, 7 News.
The Queen has cancelled 2 more virtual audiences as she continues to battle COVID. It's the second time the 95-year-old monarch has postponed meetings since being diagnosed this week. Buckingham Palace says she's still experiencing mild cold-like symptoms. Back home, it's been a glorious Friday afternoon and it will be a lovely night with our run of warm weather set to continue over the weekend. Gertie's at Campbelltown tonight, where a local institution's celebrating a major milestone.
Jane, it's Mikato's 50th birthday. If you live in the area, chances are you know very well of this store. And, well, the Italian-owned family business just boasts some of the best food and wine that Adelaide has to offer here. And tonight, the store is the toast of Adelaide's northeast. The Aperol spritz are flowing. There's no shortage of food. And it's the perfect way to congratulate the Copperosso family on their success. They've given so much to the local community too. And, of course, Jane, it's not a party without cake. And I have to say, I don't think this tiramisu is going to last long. Tomorrow, staying warm, clear skies too. I'll be back with the full forecast a little bit later though.
Oh, I wouldn't mind a piece of that. That would be delicious. Thank you, Gertie. It's feared a serial arsonist has set yet another fire south of the city, forcing residents to flee. That's next. Also, a bandit with an axe terrorises a Woodville Park service station worker. The sporting world rallies around Rod Marsh after his heart attack. And giving Adelaide's last remaining drive-in cinema a noisy musical send-off. Police are investigating if a serial firebug's responsible for yet another fire south of the city. Neighbours in a block of units were forced to flee their homes when the blaze erupted.
The Housing Trust home at Christie Downs was firebombed just before midnight.
It was raging out through the windows, it went up into the roof.
Michelle and her pet ferret Belle were forced to flee as fire crews tackled the blaze and saved 3 adjoining units.
I mean, how many times can this go on and we narrowly avert a crisis?
It's the latest in a series of arson attacks on Housing Trust homes along Rufus and Nadia Crescents. Last November, another unit around the corner was torched 3 times within a month. Neighbours say Lenny, who lives next door to the firebombed unit, was attacked earlier in the day.
26, he's just had the crap beaten out of him today, and some has decided to light up number 27.
Detectives were at the scene this morning talking to neighbours and searching for clues. There's no way of knowing if the same firebug is responsible for all of these attacks, but residents fear they could strike again.
Well, someone could end up dying, couldn't they? It's just inevitable, isn't it, if someone keeps firebombing places?
Damage has been estimated at $60,000. Peter Caldecott, 7 News.
A servo attendant was threatened with an axe during a terrifying robbery at Woodville Park early this morning. The bandit stormed the On the Run just after 5 and demanded cash. He took off on foot and was seen getting into a car parked nearby. The victim was shaken up but not physically harmed. Australian cricket legend Rod Marsh remains in a Queensland hospital tonight after suffering a heart attack. Fans around the world are holding out hope the 74-year-old will pull through.
With wife Roz flying into Bundaberg to be by his side, Rod Marsh's cricket family are also doing what they can as the Aussie legend fights for life. Critical but stable after a massive heart attack yesterday morning.
Obviously just wish Bacchus the best. We've been trying to stay abreast as much as we can of the information and kind of all hit everyone yesterday.
It's understood the 74-year-old will remain under heavy sedation at Bundaberg Hospital for potentially the next several days. Marsh's struggle not far from the thoughts of our current day stars preparing for the tour of Pakistan. Many worked closely with him as head selector up until 2016.
His outlook on the game, it's quite refreshing in that role. He's very relaxed. He's backed players in. Doesn't take things too seriously.
We heard some relatively positive good news last night, and he'll be much better with his family gathering around him.
Great guy. Just wish him all the best.
Andrew McCormack, 7 News.
The identity of a driver behind a terrifying road rage incident can finally be revealed. That's next. Also, the syndicate from an outback town with 63 million reasons to party. And footy's nearly back with South Adelaide already leading the nation in a very different event. The man who unleashed a frightening road rage attack on an innocent motorist at Seaford in June can finally be unmasked. A heavily intoxicated Ryan Simpson reversed into Chloe Lyons' car on Commercial Road, then did a U-turn and slammed into it head-on. A man who filmed the incident from the footpath had to jump out of the way when Simpson drove towards him. He'll be sentenced next month. A road safety campaign targeting older drivers will be hitting our screens this weekend. People over 70 make up 23% of road fatalities in South Australia, with police launching a mass campaign to bring the toll down.
As we grow older, driving can become more challenging and stressful, but we can reduce the risks.
This campaign is designed to try and start conversations between family members, between the medical fraternity with older drivers.
It targets high-risk settings for older motorists, including night driving, bad weather and peak hour traffic. Last night's $126 million Powerball jackpot has been split in two. A syndicate of 250 people in Kalgoorlie, Western Australia, is sharing in half the profits. They'll receive just over $250,000 each. A Coffs Harbour man claimed the other $63 million. He's planning to buy a sports car and a house. The footy pre-season can be gruelling, but one local club has taken it to the next level. South Adelaide players are taking part in FebFast, giving up luxuries to raise money for a good cause. And with just days to go, they're leading the nation.
FebFast is all about pausing for a cause. In other words, giving up alcohol, sugar or another vice. At South Adelaide, almost everyone's on board.
To sharpen up the diet and drop the alcohol away a little bit, it's actually been really good, so certainly feeling a lot better for it. Get off my phone a little bit and give a bit more time to the people around me, so yeah, gave up all social media platforms, and I definitely don't think I'll be going back to them all at the end of it either.
35 Panthers players from the men's and women's programs are involved, the most from any club in Australia. Collingwood sits second.
To have that kind of familiarity and something to all focus on and keep each other accountable has been really special and a great way to bond the team.
So far, the Panthers have raised over $7,000, which will go to the Sammy D Foundation, set up to address youth violence following the death of former South junior Sammy Davis.
Through the Sammy D Foundation, they run a mentoring program which supports at-risk youth in the community and offers them a one-to-one mentors.
The more we can do it, the more, I guess, awareness we can bring and the money we can raise all goes back to the foundation and really helps us continue to educate.
You could call it a pre-season with purpose. Andrew Hayes, 7 News.
Good on them. We'll have to give something up next year.
I love the idea of giving up social media.
That's a great idea, actually.
It will help the mental fitness of many, many people. If
it would. It would. Now, we've had our first look today at some trial matches with the Crows and Port on the Gold Coast, both of them.
Yes. Now, look, the results weren't great, but don't worry about that. They're only practice matches. They don't count, so don't panic anyone out there, OK? And coming up, well, let's go with the Crows first. They did struggle on the scoreboard, but a youngster lived up to all the hype, just about assuring him a spot in round one. Injury concerns for some key Port Adelaide stars after a wayward effort against the Suns. The Aussie skipper gives the green light for an early exit out of Pakistan. Hello again. Crows young gun Josh Rachele has taken centre stage against Brisbane, all but locking himself in for round one debut. The teenager kicked 3 of Adelaide's 7 goals. Matty Crouch got through unscathed as the Lions ran riot on the Gold Coast with an 88-point win.
Not often a pre-season thumping would leave Matthew Nicks feeling optimistic.
Pretty tough day at the office, but, we're still 22 days from round 1 too, so we're certainly focused on that at this point in time.
With 6 of Adelaide's best 22 missing, Rachele was a shining light. The weight of expectation was no burden for the prized pick. After some tidy work up the ground early on, his first goal came at the start of the third, thanks to some creative setup work from Harry Schonberg.
And he has kicked it through.
Rachele then showed great awareness and a good turn of speed to convert his second in traffic, but with the help of Jake Saligo, saved his best for last.
And winds up. That is a magnificent strike.
And some of the Brisbane boys that are probably 5 to 6 years in at least, those sorts of players that have that power and speed, he's certainly got that. Probably with you there a little bit, I was surprised how easy he did it as well. But he's a beautiful timer of the ball.
Matt Crouch played minutes in all 4 quarters in a huge sign he's ready to return to AFL level. Riley Thilthorpe kicked 2 goals in a new-look forward line without Taylor Walker, while Mitch Hinge showed he's prepared to put his body on the line.
Oh, Joe Danaher going back through the traffic.
Ned McHenry wore the full force of this nasty tackle but played on. The sky threatened to open, but the only thing it rained was Brisbane goals. Adelaide was torn apart on transition defence. Brownlow medalist Lachie Neale got creative as the Lions cruised to an easy win. The Crows will potentially welcome back key names Sloan, Dawson, Smith, Millerer and Duday for next week's clash with the Power.
It's frustrating a little bit with our protocols at the moment because we're really 11 days with COVID and the Victorian clubs are 7, so we're actually a couple of training sessions behind for these boys.
Theodoropoulos, 7 News.
Not a great result for Port Adelaide either. They went down by 21 points to the Suns, and to rub some salt into the wounds, injuries to Sam Powell-Pepper, Connor Rozee and Scott Lycett.
The expected heavy rainfall held off for the late game and the Suns took advantage. This is the type of ball movement any club would be happy with at this time of year.
The difference between training intensity and game intensity can always be quite a significant shift, and I don't think we found anywhere near that shift.
Alir showed some shades of his All-Australian form last season, and they had some nice movement, but they couldn't convert. They went into half-time with 1 goal and 10 behinds. Powell-Pepper looked great early, kicking a nice goal before he hurt his hamstring late in the first half and didn't return.
Pep looked like he had a reasonable, obvious hamstring, so we'll wait and see on that one.
Rozee was managed in the second half with a sore ankle, and Lycett also hurt his ankle early in the third.
I think we all know how important Scott Lycett is to our team, our program, our lineup. So he's looked at maybe a little bit worse, but again, he's a big guy, puts a lot of weight through that. But again, we'll just wait and see.
Port will likely be cautious next week with Lycett, while Dixon is still a chance for round 1. Andrew Hayes, 7 News.
Crows AFLW coach Matty Clark says he expects superstar Erin Phillips to play a game before finals. The coach feared he may have lost her for the season when she landed awkwardly in last weekend's 40-point win over GWS.
A reasonably concerning incident, but in the end it was a really good outcome, and we're really pleased that she'll be available pretty soon. And as soon as she is available, clearly we'll put her back in.
Tomorrow it's first versus second when the Crows take on Fremantle in a blockbuster top-of-the-table clash. Well, skipper Pat Cummins says he's comfortable with himself and other players leaving Australia's historic tour of Pakistan early to play in the Indian Premier League. Cummins, Dave Warner, Josh Hazlewood and Glenn Maxwell won't play white ball cricket against Pakistan, but will join the IPL before the end of the history-making tour.
Yeah, comfortable with the decision. It's the realities of playing cricket, 3 formats, 12 months of the year.
The tour begins with a 3-test series, Australia's first trip to Pakistan since 1988. Back then, of course, it was when Mark Taylor equalled Don Bradman's famous knock of 334. Well, Adelaide United's women can create history tomorrow night when they take on Melbourne in the league's first ever Pride game. A win against the Victory would secure finals for the first time in the club's history. Star striker Chelsea Dorber has been given the all-clear after recovering from a heavy knock.
We're not focusing too much on the result. We just want to enjoy the moment and perform as we can, and we think the result will take care of itself.
In the men's game, young gun Bernardo left training early after picking up a knock in the warm-up. United take on Central Coast straight after the women's game at Hindmarsh. And Russia's invasion of Ukraine is already causing severe ramifications for sport. Russian city St. Petersburg has been stripped from hosting football's Champions League final after scoring a classic for Atalanta in the Europa League against Olympiacos. Ukrainian international Ruslan Malinovsky displayed a "No War in Ukraine" message on his T-shirt. Meanwhile, Aussie aerial skier Danielle Scott has boycotted World Cup events in Russia, tweeting, "I can't believe this is happening. In the uniquely unifying power of sport, I wished so badly for this situation to be different." And our one to watch is at Morphettville this weekend. That's racing tomorrow. Race 7, number 6, Field of Roses. Good luck if you have a little flutter on that. Jane, you and I, we got Division 8 in that Powerball as well, just so you know.
Doesn't pay for anything really.
$10.
$10 to your money. And the Australian share market managed to make a modest improvement today. The ASX 200 climbed 7 points higher. Among the market movers, Ardent Leisure gained 23 cents, while Blackmores lost $8.87. The Aussie dollar's buying 72 US cents and 53 pence. And we'll be back with a ray of sunshine from Gertie next.
And it's staying warm over the weekend before a mild change arrives on Monday. I'll have your weather details live from Campbelltown.
Time for weather news now. And Gertie, the festivities are probably in full swing in Campbelltown by now, I reckon.
They certainly are, Jane. It's the perfect night for a party, and tonight the local Italian community is celebrating 50 years of Mercatos, and the store's always such a vibrant place to visit, and well, you can see why. Right now it is 25 degrees in the city. We hit a top of 30.1 this afternoon after an overnight low of 16.3. It was a dry day across the suburbs and further afield too, although there was some thunderstorm activity over eastern parts of the Riverland and Murraylands. It reached 33 in Renmark, 26 in Narracourt. A trough off the east coast is causing heavy rain and storms in southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales, while a high pressure system over the Bights driving the clear and calm conditions here. Interstate 25 with more rain on the way for Brizzy. A very high chance of showers in Sydney, 26 the top, mostly sunny, and 33 for Perth. Back home, hot and sunny for the state's far north. There's just a slight chance of a thunderstorm in the far northeast. 37's the top for Coober Pedy and Roxby Downs. 38 for Maree, mild to warm near the coast, 27 for Ceduna, 25 for Port Lincoln, 30 for Whyalla, 34 for Port Pirie and Renmark, 30 for Murray Bridge, 28 for Mount Gambier, and 23 is the top for Kings Code and Victor Harbour. And there's a strong wind warning in place for the lower southeast coast. In the city, a sunny day, heading for a top of 30 degrees after a low of 17. On metro waters, south to southeasterly winds will shift southeast to southwesterly, then back to southeasterly with seas below a metre. To the outlook, partly cloudy and 30 on Sunday, 28 with a shower possible Monday, 26 Tuesday and Wednesday, warming to 30 on Thursday, 25 for this time next week. And before I go, let's take a look at tonight's ray of sunshine.
Yes, SAFM driving car Sydney. This is going to be something super special.
South Aussies certainly gave Adelaide's last remaining drive-in a send-off to remember. Led by Cozzy and the Adelaide Symphony Orchestra, drivers did their best rendition of the classic waltz. The final screening plays tomorrow after a near sell-out summer season. A very fitting send-off, Jane. And before I leave Campbelltown, I think I'm going to have to go track down where that tiramisu went to. It looked absolutely delicious.
It did indeed. Not such a melodious send-off, but a significant one indeed for the drive-in. Well, that's all the news we have for now. I'll have updates through the evening, but for all of us here in the 7 Newsroom, have a great weekend. Good night.